Now, at the time of this recording, graduations have been underway. And even on my team, we've had about 3 graduates. So shouts out to them. Now, in the mental performance industry, the next phase, usually after graduation, is let's find a job. Now, obviously, this whole industry pathology is about navigating that space and best practices to become a great practitioner to get jobs or just build your reputation or build your business. Now, I've been seeing a lot of job postings online, and there's one in particular that stood out that I saw shared amongst other people. But I saw one post from Nija Richardson. I'm gonna put it on the screen and you can take a look at the caption yourself. But it's what inspired this episode because what is actually being put out there when they're looking for an applicant? Now, it's quite common that there's going to be certain preferred credentials or even required credentials, but oftentimes in this industry, the clinical side takes a precedent. And I get why. Let's break this down first and foremost. What is the difference? Now, to the layperson who's not in our field, they probably won't be able to tell you. And sadly, some people in the field can tell you, but still veer on convoluting those lines. Now, a clinical is typically going to be able to diagnose. That's the biggest takeaway. Obviously, there's other factors in their role, but being able to diagnose a disorder is going to be the main factor. And when it comes to performance teams, sports, military, law enforcement, that's a great tool because there will be people who need that type of help. But on the other side, what we call a mental performance coach or a mental performance consultant, this veers more a little bit into educational skills building, teaching them how to be able to manage their stress, perform under pressure, even cognitive training. Now, they're not exclusive to each other. And that's why a lot of these job postings look for someone who can do both. But herein lies the problem. In that post that I shared, spoke on this. What are they actually going to be able to do? Now, from the clinical side, most people in the performance psych field know where they got to stop and can't go further. But is the same being done from the clinicians who veer into our world? Sometimes not. And I've actually spoken to clinicians who have given props to us, but they still try to do their best in our world. But since there's no accrediting body that says you can't do it, what are they supposed to do? Now, obviously, there's the CMPC, which gives you some type of certification, and that's a whole issue in itself, and I'll definitely make a video on that. But the problem is, when they're looking for these applicants, they're usually asking for clinical. So the problem with this is most people in our field specifically aren't going the clinical route. Now, is there programs where you can get a clinical licensure while doing sport and performance psychology? Yes, but these are few and far between. And a lot of people don't want to put the extra time. They want to get into the workforce, or like myself personally, it wasn't for me. To give you a little bit of background, I talk about this a lot. I started in the clinical world originally to be a mental health counselor. And then I switched to sports psychology, got that degree. And then I did a PsyD program, a doctor of clinical psychology. And I dropped out of that because it wasn't for me. I got about a year and a half in. I did some mock sessions. I learned psychopathology, great stuff and tools that definitely helped me to be the practitioner I am in general, but it wasn't really my forte. But the thing is, I like to go hands-on. Now, the people doing clinical, they can be hands-on. I know some professionals who can do both very well, but all honesty, when it comes to performance, there's some lacking there. Because all being said, you need to be able to implement this. And it's more than just knowing some types of skill sets or just educating on stress management, box breathing, visualization. These are cliche things that everyone learns in their degree programs, whether they're clinical or not. But when it comes to working with actual clients, they're looking for someone who can help them perform better. And sometimes that goes beyond the typical psychobabble. Now, when I do my own practice, one of the biggest things that separates me and allow my body one to grow to what it is, I have a strength and conditioning background. I have a cognitive training background. I have a clinical background. I have a personality psychology background. You get my point. But I'm able to veer in all these worlds. And the appeal is I can speak different languages. And I'm a former athlete myself. I still can perform pretty well at my age. I'm 36. So it's the appeal of how do you present this information and yourself to these performers. Now, the clinicians, when they put up these job posts, it looks for someone who can be able to do multiple roles because from an economic standpoint, it's better to have one person who can veer in multiple roles, like most businesses, right? They want to find someone who can do more than just one thing. Even myself look for that. But it's not going to be able to always be evenly split. And it makes sense cost effectively wise. If I can pay you to do both roles, great. But are they going to be as effective? Now, what's misleading is when they put out these job applications, people see these titles: mindset coach, performance integrationist, mental consultant. Whatever the name is, the title really doesn't matter because the requirements almost always look the same. Preferred clinician, preferred mental health counseling. They'll have the CMPC, they'll have a master's in sports psychology or adjacent field, but it's kind of stops there with what they really want to see, and the rest goes to a clinician. So it's almost like a bait and switch when someone's hyped up about getting this opportunity and they read through the qualifications, they get discouraged. And the comments in that post really showed that, because not saying they can't apply, but it does usually go to a clinician. I personally have seen this and I've been on the other side of that. So it's not a good feeling to not be able to be the better position, but can't get it because you don't have certain credentials or titles. And what this does, it kind of turns the whole mental performance term in the industry itself into like a buzzword of just people who do anything that has to do with psychology or mental health. That's kind of like saying a person who does physical therapy is the same as a personal trainer, or saying that a doctor is the same as a nurse. Yes, they work in similar fields, but they do not do the same job. They do not have the same experience. Even using that analogy, most doctors can't give you good fitness advice. So there is a relevance for getting practitioners who spent their time helping performers in a dynamic aspect, because this is what they need. And what happens to the industry, why I say it gets misbranded, they're going to think it's a whole bunch of clinicians and therapists. And I've seen this firsthand. I had an NFL player that I spoke with, and they were checking me out and thinking like, okay, I don't need a clinician, but their only perception of this stuff, because in their past experiences working with sports psychs, was that working with someone who's going to go more the clinical route. And doesn't mean they're diagnosing disorders, but they went more so the route of the touchy-feely type of stuff. And you know what I'm talking about. But when I came in, he loved my dynamic, hard-hitting approach, because guess what? That's what he has to do. And we know how to navigate that a little better now. I can say that there is people that can do both, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to do the right thing for the right job. And that's why this is getting an issue, because what does our industry really become when we call it applied psychology or applied sports psychology, but most of it is clinical or theoretical? It's missing the key component, the practical approach, the application. Now, let's call it what it is. It's mislabeling, and it's leading people astray. And more professionals I see coming up get discouraged from being in this field. I have a team of interns who all told me that they're not getting the guidance they need, and having an outlook for the ones who just graduated. What do they have to look for if everything putting out there is going to ask for additional things that wasn't going to be what they went in the first place? So we got to get this industry in line with the mission that we claim we want. And that goes beyond just an organization or some kind of certification, but actually real people like yourself, like myself, and be able to guide it to where it needs to be. We have to do it in action. I'm getting sick of seeing the same posts. That's why I made Industry Pathology. Same cliche, quoting an article or quoting a famous athlete. You know, I always say there's a survivorship bias problem in this industry. No, we can't keep doing that. We need to be vocal, even if it doesn't sound good. There's a lot of echo chambering going on in this industry, and we got to stop it. So my diagnosis today is mental mislabeling disorder. Kind of speaks for itself. Stop calling it what it's not and call it what it is. If it's clinical, straight up say it's a clinical position. If you have additional skill sets, great. They'll save a lot of people time. But the problem that's going to happen is you're going to narrow your applicant pool, because most people aren't going to have both. It's just the way it goes. So hope this was helpful and brought some light to things. Like I said, I saw this. I pivoted on what I was going to do. I had a whole other topic that I was going to record, but I'm glad Naja put that post out. And as always, guys, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week. And that's my pathology.